Hello, everybody. Oh yeah, I'm still streaming. It's Memorial Day, but that doesn't really affect me. So, no streaming holiday. Um, hope everyone is doing well. And yeah, I just realized like 20 minutes ago, I was trying to remember what happened last time and where we left off, and it was completely a blank. And I was like looking back in the book, and I was like, "Oh, we're getting on a boat to rescue Yue Chunqing." So that is happening. Henry, I have missed Moshi too. Moshi makes a great wife. Um, and Memorial Day is a federal holiday that has to do with like the military or something. So you might get off work or you might not. It depends on the kind of job, but yeah, it's these days it's like mostly an excuse to have sales, honestly. Um, so now that I sort of jogged my memory about what was happening, um, and I'm really excited to find out what's up with Yue Chunqing. And we're on chapter 77, which is on page 121. And this is also a crazy chapter title. It is Burgeoning Passion. So I'm going to get started. The walnut ship soared through the cloud-dappled sky. The pleasure boat kept pace, but at a healthy distance. It was clear that Murong Chuyi was so averse to Jiang Yeshui that he wasn't even willing to fly alongside him. At dusk, the sun sank into the depths of the cloud sea, its brilliance lapping against the oars like the world's great river. Oh right, they're in like a sky boat. They can't just be in a normal boat. They have to like be in the sky. Gumong had never seen such a sight and leaned over the ship's railing so as not to miss a moment. Reflected within those rain-washed blue eyes were the golden hues of eventide and the vast and distant lands below. He was thoroughly engrossed in the view when something suddenly jabbed at his shin, twice. Gumong turned. At first, he saw no one, but after lowering his gaze, he saw that the culprit was an enchanted ceramic servant that could move under its own power. This servant was painted crudely, with uneven eyes and its nose and mouth squished together. Gumong found it incredibly funny and laughed out loud. Who made this? It's so ugly. The bamboo curtain in the cabin rose and fell. Jiang Yeshui emerged, clad in cream robes, the shade of lotus root, and seated in his wooden wheelchair powered by spiritual energy. He said to Gumong, "You made it." Gumong was speechless. At his shock and bewilderment, Jiang Yeshui laughed. "It was a long time ago, when you were still in the army. You saw me making clay figurines, and of course you had to make one too. But you didn't have much patience back then. You always did things impulsively, starting off strong but losing steam toward the end." That's relatable. "You sculpted half of it with me before you lost interest and half-heartedly drew on a face." So that's what happened. Gumong sized up the ugly ceramic servant. When he considered how it had come from his own hands, he felt a little queer. The pottery figure bore signs of age, and some of its lacquer had already lost its color. It walked in circles around Gumong, its crooked mouth opening and closing as it recited clumsily, "Eat, eat." Gumong reached deep into his sleeves and then said helplessly, "I didn't bring anything to eat. Also, you're made of clay. Why do you want to eat?" The ugly ceramic figure repeated stubbornly, "Eat, eat." Gumong thought that its obstinate expression, with its brows all scrunched up, was actually quite similar to Moshi's at times. But he had to keep such thoughts to himself. If anyone found out, whether it was the venerated Moshi himself or the droves of girls in Chonghua obsessed with Shihajun, Gumong would land himself in no end of trouble. He tried to shoo the figurine away. "There's nothing for you to eat. You can go." The ugly clay servant reached out a tiny hand to tug on Gumong's sleeve. "Eat, eat." "It's not asking you for food," Jiang Yeshue said with a smile. "It wants you to go into the cabin to eat." Gumong had thought they would have to subsist on rations over this long journey and hadn't expected a sit-down meal. Curious, he asked, "Did you make the food?" "No." "Then forget it." Gumong shook his head like a rattle drum. "Whatever Shihajun makes is completely inedible." "I've equipped this walnut ship with a couple of little enchanted clay figurines like this one," Jiang Yeshui explained. "They did all the cooking." "I need something like that. Just some simple dishes, but..." He paused and smiled. "It'll still be better than what Shihajun makes." That brought Gumong a measure of relief. He turned to look at the pleasure boat sailing off in the distance. "We aren't asking Little Dragon, asking Murong Xiansheng to come eat?" "Xiaojiao won't come." Jiang Yeshui's expression dimmed, appearing gloomy and indistinct in the light of the setting sun. With a twitch of his fingertips, his wooden wheelchair turned and rolled toward the ship's cabin. "Let's go." Within, 2 small clay people were busily arranging dishes and pouring tea. They were much more pleasant to look at than the one Gumong had made. Their noses were noses, and their eyes were indeed eyes. One was a man and one a woman, both very endearing. Although the dishes on the table weren't sophisticated fare, they were refreshing and tasty, and the tea was clear and sweet. Gumong didn't like to drink tea, so Jiang Yeshue had warmed a jar of wine for him. "Don't drink too much," Moshi said. Jiang Yeshue replied fondly, "This is fragrant snow wine. It's not easy to get drunk on it. If he likes it, let him do as he wants." Gumong licked his lips, grinning artlessly. As the moist tip of his tongue darted out between his lips, Moshi swept a disapproving glance over it. "Qingshu Elder, he's a criminal. Why bother treating him with the same courtesy as before?" Despite his words, Moshi still let Gumong have his way. It was indeed difficult to get drunk off of fragrant snow wine, but in the end, it was still wine. Gumong found its mild sweetness very much to his liking, and ended up having a few cups too many. The food the little clay servants had prepared also contained some new and exciting flavors, and they were in charge of refilling all the dishes. Intrigued by their ungainly mannerisms as they served the food, Gumong wolfed down 3 more bowls than usual just so he could keep watching them. When they finished dinner, each returned to their individual cabins to rest. Gumong's spiritual energy wasn't considered stable. He had, after all, gone berserk on Murong Lian's watch in recent memory, and they couldn't afford any risks with their walnut ship so high in the sky. Moshi had to monitor him as closely as possible, so he and Gumong were sharing a cabin tonight. "So full," Gumong groaned, holding his belly as he collapsed face first onto his bed. "Get up." Moshi, ever fastidious, hauled Gumong back to his feet. "Go bathe before you sleep." Gumong refused. "I won't." "If you won't bathe, then you can sleep on the deck tonight." Gumong collected his blankets, clearly ready to go sleep on the deck in the wind. Moshi's sharp brows drew together in anger as he dragged Gumong back. "Who said you could leave?" he said severely. "Lie down." Gumong's sleepy eyes were unfocused, their blue irises like a mist-veiled lake. "Can't I just not take a bath?" "No." Gumong frowned so intently his brows nearly touched. He slowly curled into a ball. "I really don't want to. I feel so weak. Why don't you help me wash?" And there was only one cabin. Oh, hi, Wolf. Yeah, you might be really confused. Moshi had worn a severe expression, but Gumong's response caught him off guard. He froze, and a hint of embarrassment surfaced on his features, instantly undercutting his intimidating aura. "Don't even think about it," he responded after a pause. Gumong sighed and threw himself back onto the bed, sprawling across the blankets. He looked as though he could fall asleep just like this. Moshi's efforts to govern him were apparently fruitless. He was left to head to the washroom alone, where he took a bath and changed into clean clothes. Moshi had assumed Gumong was acting out to avoid the bath, but when he returned, he found Gumong burrowed deep in the blankets, clutching his stomach. His brow was furrowed as he mumbled softly. At this point, there was no need for him to keep up the act. With a small jolt of surprise, Moshi realized he was truly feeling unwell. He dried his damp hair and came to the side of Gumong's bed. "What's wrong?" Long lashes trembling, Gumong opened his eyelids a crack. His clear blue eyes were misty as he glanced weakly at Moshi. Ate too much," he grumbled. "So full, stomach hurts." For a while, Moshi was silent. "Deserved," he said succinctly. But still he sat beside Gumong and gestured with a grim expression. "Roll over here." Gumong hesitated. He generally couldn't afford to anger this person, and he could afford it even less when he was so weak. After all, a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. If he was told to roll, then he would roll. Thus, he turned over twice on the bed, coming to a stop next to Moshi's hand. "Do I need to keep rolling?" "Lie down and don't move," said Moshi. So Gumong lay stiff as a salted fish. His clothes were in disorder, and his gaping lapels exposed an expanse of firm, scarred skin beneath. After a glance, Moshi reached over to pull Gumong's collar closed. Then he moved his hands to Gumong's stomach and slowly began to knead at it. Gumong smacked his lips. "Are you punishing me for eating too much?" "What do you think?" Moshi said curtly. It wasn't Gumong's cynicism that was to blame, but Moshi's ornery personality. So often did he make life difficult for Gumong that Gumong had figured this somewhat ungentle massage was a new form of punishment. This punishment wasn't unbearable. Although the kneading felt strange, the discomfort in his gut really did ease under Moshi's ministrations. Lying on the bed, Gumong heaved a sigh, his vision gradually dimming. Before he dropped off completely, he mumbled, "Then, you can punish me a little longer." In his last moments of consciousness, he saw Moshi's face go rigid as he registered these words, his eyes seeming to darken. Gumong's head lolled to the side. Face pressed to Moshi's arm, he fell into a hazy slumber. That night, he dreamed once more, those lost memories glowing faintly. He dreamed of a low tent, wind whistling outside as he breathed in the fragrance of pear blossom white wine as well as Moshi's honeyed scent. The world swam before his eyes. He realized this was the night of Moshi's coming of age, which he'd only half remembered. On that night, he'd brought a porn booklet from an old bookstall, his heart filled with mischief as he gifted it to his Moshidi on the eve of his adulthood. He hadn't realized he was playing with fire until Moshi finally pulled him down onto the bed. The last dream had ended at this point, the memory broken off. He'd always been confused as to what exactly happened next, and why the scenario made him feel parched and uneasy. Perhaps it was due to the wine and Moshi massaging his stomach in his bed, that regular, forceful rhythm, recalling another kind of rhythm from his past. Like clouds and mist dispersing, he remembered. On the night of Moshi's coming of age, they'd fallen together onto the narrow little army cot. His thoughts were muddled, but he could remember with perfect clarity the passionate look on Moshi's face. His handsome, youthful, self-restrained features were drowned in the mist of love and desire. His dark eyes, usually so cool and controlled, looked slightly bewildered, like a young beast that had fallen into the trap of lust. Youth meant inexperience and impetuousness, meant boundless power straining to break loose. Beastliness meant primal instinct and veracity, limitless desire threatening to spill out. Those eyes stared fixedly and unerringly at Gumong. Clothes fell to the floor like the prying open of a clamshell, revealing trembling flesh beneath and the faint scent of the sea. Gumong's throat bobbed as he swallowed. And now he was faced with the sight of Moshi undressed, which was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. His shoulders were broad, his waist slender yet well-muscled. Back then, Moshi had far fewer scars, especially on his chest. Back then, his chest was perfect and unblemished, clean of the wound Gumong had personally carved into his flesh. In the dancing light and shadow, the bed swayed under the weight of their tangled bodies, emitting a strange chorus of creaks. Gumong remembered how Moshi's motions had first been restrained as he pinned Gumong beneath him. As the night wore on, the young man's desire went to his head, and his thrusts grew faster and harder. Gumong felt as though he had become clay in Moshi's hands, as his wine-softened limbs were rearranged, half by his own will and half by Moshi's, into every sort of position as the two of them entwined. He remembered Moshi's alluring lips slightly parted as he panted, his low gasps as he pressed close to Gumong's ear. His body surging ceaselessly in the murky light. An overwhelming sensation rushed through him. Gumong couldn't help but let out a hoarse moan, just like the one from his memories. Shitty. Ah. Then, as though he had stepped into thin air, Gumong's eyes flew open. His violent shudders gradually ceased, like the tide receding. He was soaked in sweat and still trembling minutely, panting through glossy lips. Those unfocused blue eyes looked up, right into Moshi's face, which was now tense beneath the candlelight. That's the end of that chapter. We're on chapter 78, which is called No Sense of Shame. What happened to me? Gumong stammered in confusion. He didn't describe his condition in more detail, but Moshi, with a downward flick of his gaze, immediately saw the messy stain on Gumong's underclothes and sank into an uncomfortable silence. Gumong was unsettled by this reaction from his body. I don't feel quite right. Am I sick? You're not, said Moshi. You're not sick. Gumong's face was still flushed from the dream, and his breathing was rapid. He looked down at his own pants in helpless confusion. Then what's going on here? His blue eyes were wide, giving Moshi the impression of a pure and innocent wolf cub. However, this wolf cub's questions were too embarrassing. The old Gumong had once charged at Moshi with an erotic booklet to give him a coming-of-age lesson, but Moshi was too thin-skinned. No matter the circumstances, he could never do anything of the sort. You're just having a normal reaction, Moshi replied. It was only a dream, that's all. Gumong quickly nodded. It was just a dream. I dreamed of the night you came of age again. We were sleeping together, and then we did some very strange things. Moshi said nothing. You looked like you really liked it. You seemed very happy. Moshi was especially adept at dealing out torment in bed. Without fail, he pushed Gumong until he was choking back sobs, his body limp and his lips moving in pleas for mercy. Yet it was difficult for Moshi to say anything lewd if he wasn't pushed to the limit. Conversely, Gumong had always spouted the most mortifying things during their wildest entanglements, though whether he was trying to provoke Moshi or simply couldn't shut up was anyone's guess. Those words added fuel to an already raging fire, goading the youthful Moshi until he couldn't suppress his fervor. The world became firewood and flames, and the man in his arms the only source of water. He plunged repeatedly into the depths of the sweet spring, seeking to dampen the scalding heat in his heart. Gumong blinked, his eyes watery and bewildered. "So you liked doing those things with me, right?" Moshi wanted to say no, but before the word could leave his lips, Gumong continued pensively. "I think I liked it. It felt really good." He looked up, his face still tinged with the flush brought on by those memories. "It seemed like you needed me." Moshi immediately stilled. "It's good to be needed by someone," Gumong said softly. "For someone to get happiness from me, not because of hatred or venting. That felt so good." "Do you know what you're talking about?" Moshi asked. "How I felt back then," Gumong replied sincerely. "I'm talking about how I felt back then, on the night you came of age. I've remembered everything now. Some of those feelings I don't understand and can't describe, but the others, I know I really liked them." Ouch. Suddenly pain. Moshi felt as if he'd been dealt a heavy blow to the heart. Ever since Gumong defected, Moshi had wondered what Gumong had felt toward him. He often thought that Gumong had been half-heartedly placating him, dealing with him, toying with him, or perhaps that he had been pestered into doing what Moshi wanted. When the word liked entered his ears, after 7 long years, he suddenly didn't know how to react. "I've been living with you this whole time, without ever helping you out and always making you mad. Why didn't you tell me I could make you like me like that?" Moshi jumped to his feet like a cat whose tail had been trod on. Swallowing hard, he glared through red-rimmed eyes. Who said I liked you? Stop imagining things." Gumong's eyes widened in puzzlement. "But you were clearly... That was just a dream. Seems to me like you've had too much medicine. You can't even tell dreams from reality." Gumong wanted to speak, but he didn't know what to say. His tense, upright posture sagged slightly. He seemed disheartened, yet also unconvinced. After a moment's downcast thought, he suddenly stood and captured Moshi's lips with his own, pressing their mouths together. Moshi's ears buzzed. All the blood in his body rushed toward his brain. For a split second, the world flashed white. It was just like the past, like the days Moshi remembered in his dreams. Gumong looping his arms around his neck, pulling him down, his tongue pressing in between his teeth, lingering and tangling, making soft, wet sounds. Gumong felt a sudden sharp pain at the tip of his tongue. Moshi was shoving him away. "You..." Moshi panted, his lips, usually cold and colorless, flushed red by their passion, making for a singularly arresting sight. But this beauty's brows were drawn tight in fury, glaring daggers that pierced clean through Gumong. Moshi was so angry he couldn't speak. Only after a long while did he yank at his lapels, which Gumong had pulled into disarray, drawing them closed. "You really have no sense of shame," he snarled. Gumong rubbed at his lips. Moshi had bitten him so viciously that he had drawn blood, like an anxious beast trapped in a dead end. But there was something Gumong had finally confirmed. "You are lying to me." Moshi was silent. "That wasn't a dream. It was real." Gumong swept a glance over the lower half of Moshi's body. "Just a moment ago, I felt you against me." Moshi could muster no response. At last, he flung aside the door curtain and strode out of the room, his expression black as pitch. When Gumong hurried after him, Moshi turned and furiously jabbed a finger at his chest. "Stay where you are. Tell anyone about what happened tonight, and I'll send you back to Luomei Pavilion the minute we return." "Where are you going?" Gumong asked. "None of your business." "But aren't you sleeping with me?" "Listen up, asshole," Moshi bit out through gritted teeth. "A gentleman knows what to do and what not to do. I will excuse your inappropriate actions today, because I know your mind isn't clear. But I've told you now, so if you still dare... Moshi choked on his words for a moment. This gentleman couldn't bring himself to describe Gumong's scoundrel behavior. He snapped, "If you still dare do anything like that again and seduce me, I'll see that you pay for it." His tone was fierce, but when paired with the parting of those fresh-kissed, suggestively pinkened lips, he inevitably became less imposing. Not only did his threats fail to quell Gumong, they conjured up the image of the Mo Shidi who had flown into an embarrassed rage at Gumong's teasing all those years ago. Even if many of the details from back then still eluded him, this feeling was like an unsealed jug of fine wine, suffusing the air with its rich scent. Gumong lowered his head and couldn't hold back a puff of laughter, just like in the past. It would have been all right if he hadn't laughed. Now, Moshi's expression immediately grew darker, and his knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists. But although Gumong had recovered some of his memories, he at least wasn't quite so much of a troublemaker as he had been. That burst of laughter was pure reflex. Upon seeing that Moshi was upset, he restrained his amusement and obediently knelt on the bed. "I'm sorry," he said earnestly. "If you don't like it, then I won't do it again. Please don't send me back to Luomei Pavilion." Only then did Moshi leave the cabin, anger still etched in every line of his face. Out on the deck, he bumped into Jiang Yeshue in his wooden wheelchair. He looked up at Moshi in astonishment. "Shiha-jun, who provoked you? Why are you so angry?" Moshi pressed his lips into a thin line and said tersely, "No one provoked me. What are you here for?" Jiang Yeshue smiled. "I was on my way to bring you quilts. Do you need any?" "No." "What about Gumong?" "He's plenty warm. It would be better for him to sleep on bamboo mats." "You fought with him again?" asked Jiang Yeshue. Moshi flicked his sleeves angrily. "It's his own fault." "You two are really..." Jiang Yeshue smiled faintly. "Long ago, when Gumong was stubborn and mischievous, he loved nothing more than to make you mad. How does he still anger you so, even when he's like this? But, upset or not, you should still give him an extra quilt. His health isn't as good as it used to be, and now he's weak to the cold. If he caught a chill, it would cause even more problems on this journey. You shouldn't bicker too much with him." Moshi fell silent. At length, he reached out to take the quilt Jiang Yeshue offered. "Many thanks." When morning came, they found themselves hovering above the Dream Butterfly Islands. Jiang Yeshue took out his compass and silently recited an incantation. The little object gleamed with brilliant light, then pointed toward a small island in the southeastern portion of the archipelago. "Bat Island is there," he said. That's the end of that chapter. Those were really short chapters. We're on chapter 79, which is called Chattery Little Pig Monster. The two ships... Oh, there's... Someone is leaf blowing outside. I'm sorry if y'all can hear that. It's kind of loud. Yeah, Blue, Meat Bun's titles are really... they're really something. We were deprived of the hurt comfort. Also, I just want to say, I love Jiang Yeshue so much. Just like, good guy, Jiang Yeshue. The two ships soared through the cloud cover and descended in tandem. As the black clouds thinned, the earth loomed below. They could now easily make out the details of Bat Island. It wasn't large, and they spotted buildings hidden here and there among its forests. A demon tower stood tall at its center, with lofty eaves and a dazzling golden roof. In the cultivation realm, such towers were often built to suppress demons. Soul-subduing copper bells would hang from their eaves, and the bricks would be painted with talismans and sigils. However, this tower in the middle of Bat Island was not so. It had 7 floors, with human heads hanging where copper bells should have been. Those heads were rotted to the bone, swaying eerily in the island's coppery wind. Jiang Yeshui and Murong Chuyi both modulated the flow of their spiritual energy to set the pleasure boat and the walnut ship down directly in front of the central tower. When they had all disembarked, the boats and oars shrank to their original size and were stowed in Qiankun pouches. I will not get over that. Oh yeah, Wolf, that's probably a good idea. I'll see you later. The tower and its surroundings were dark and silent before them. Upon taking a closer look, they discovered thousands of bats clustered densely under the roof tiles. Because it was midday, these bats were sound asleep. Human sacrifice tower, Jiang Yeshui murmured. What's a human sacrifice tower? Gumong asked. I've only ever heard of demon-suppressing towers. I have the same question. It's a similar concept, Jiang Yeshui explained. People build towers to suppress demons, while demons build towers to trap people. This is a bat demon island, so of course the master of the island is a bat monster rather than a cultivator. This tower was built to imprison live humans in preparation for some future use. What kind of future use? Jiang Yeshui paled. Hard to say, he said softly. Some monsters eat people, so they store them as food. Some monsters drink blood, so they... Jiang Yeshui was still speaking when Murong Chuyi strode ahead of the group. Without a moment's hesitation, he flung a paper talisman onto the great doors of the human sacrifice tower. The doors, scarred with the traces of spells, rumbled open. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, Murong Chuyi brushed away the miasma that rushed out of the tower. Then he turned, dark brown eyes glancing coldly behind him. Jiang Yeshui, are you here to perform a rescue, or give a lecture? He then strode into the tower without a backward glance. Within seconds, the darkness had swallowed his pure white silhouette. Jiang Yeshui and the others hastened to follow. The great hall on the first floor of the human sacrifice tower was dark and empty, aside from 8 strange and imposing stone pillars. They looked to be carved with complex designs, but upon closer examination, it became clear that they were in fact constructed from many individual bones. Thousands upon thousands of bats hung upside down from their surface. These bats were nothing like common bats one might see in the wild. Each was as tall as a person, and their wings weren't dark gray, but a translucent white. Under these layers of white membranes, many of their bodies were visibly humanoid. Some had transformed greatly, while others retained their bestial features. The former were indistinguishable from regular humans, but for their membranous wings, while the latter had only grown human legs, remaining otherwise bat-like. These bat monsters, seemingly in the process of metamorphosis, blanketed the entire tower above them. They numbered several thousand, if not a full 10,000. That's terrifying. Afraid to wake them, Gumong asked softly, "Are they asleep?" Mo Shi shook his head. They're cultivating in seclusion. There are ancient records about these monsters. They're fire bats. Gumong had always been pragmatic. He swept a glance over the fire bats hanging from the 7 floors of the tower, like braised ducks, and asked Moshi a second question. Are they hard to fight? Moshi didn't answer directly. Fire bats come from a half-demon, half-immortal tribe on Jiuhua Mountain, known as the Feathered Tribe. Oh, wait a minute. The Feathered Tribe. We know them from Arha, right? They're actual immortals? Gumong sized up these furry monsters with their prominent breastbones. They must be hard to fight, he marveled. Then, these guys really don't look how I imagine immortals would at all. Muttering to himself, he shot a glance at Murong Chuyi, who stood at the head of their party. In his opinion, immortals at least had to look like this man. Graceful in gait and elegant in demeanor, as if their robes and ribbons would flutter even in the absence of a breeze. These half-rat, half-human creatures didn't compare in the least. Fortunately, Moshi had more to say, promptly saving Gumong's impression of immortals. Firebats can't be considered half-immortal. Like I said, they're the offspring of the Feathered tribe. The Feathered tribe are half-immortal and half-demon. Some of them, with stronger demonic traits, degenerate and become depraved enough to couple with beasts. The monsters resulting from this union are the firebats you see. Okay, the Feathered tribe in Peach Blossom Springs. Yeah, that's what I thought. These guys are a little different. Gumong diligently attempted the math on his fingers. So they're half immortal, half demon, half beast? They hardly inherit any immortal blood, said Moshi. It would be simpler to say they're half beast and half demon. Gumong brought the conversation back to its start. So, are they easy to fight? They're strong in terms of spiritual energy, but they're quite dull-witted, so not very difficult. But this is the gathering place of all firebat demons. If possible, it'd be better not to engage. Don't go bothering them. He turned back to Jiang Yeshue. Qingshu, can you tell if Yue Chunqing left any tracks here? Let me try to see, said Jiang Yeshue. He produced a paper talisman from his Qian-kun pouch and gently blew on it. The talisman transformed into a spiritual sparrow that danced into the air on swift wings. Seek out Chunqing's breath. After receiving its order, the sparrow fluttered toward the top of the tower. Just as it reached the 3rd level, it let out a screech. Its wings burst into formless flames, and it vanished in a wisp of gray smoke. 8 large scarlet words materialized in mid-air. Ye of foreign clan, offer sacrifice of blood. Jiang Yeshue frowned. It looks like anything that wishes to ascend the tower, whether it's us or our spiritual butterflies or beasts, must first offer fresh blood. He turned to look at a pool of blood in the center of the demon tower and sank into contemplation. Do we drip blood into it? Let's try it and see, said Moshi. The 4 approached the blood pool. Moshi unfastened the dagger hidden in his sleeve and sliced open his palm, then passed the dagger to Jiang Yeshue. After everyone let a few drops of fresh blood, fall into the pool, the scarlet within began to surge. Blood splashed, and a hair-raising snarl emanated from the pool. A blazing red beast burst from the depths. What the hell? Gumong exclaimed. Through the blood misting his vision, he saw that the beast had the body of a man, but the face of a boar. The pig monster? Tusks protruded from his snout, which was covered in fiery scarlet fur, and his eyes glowed red as the setting sun. He swung a massive hatchet, flinging off blood from the pool, then sneezed violently. The creature immediately launched into a stream of profanity. The fucking fuck's going on these days? People keep trying to trespass. You so fucking tired of being alive, you're here to be snacks for Her Highness the Bat Queen? Jiang Yeshue's eyes widened. It's a Shangao. This was a monster well known throughout the 9 provinces. Gumong, however, had lost his memories. He hadn't the slightest clue. The fact that the others clearly understood what was going on made him anxious, yet he was also embarrassed to ask. "What's a Shangao?" he whispered to Moshi. "An ancient evil beast," Moshi answered. "It's red as fire, looks like a pig, and has no interests beyond cursing people out." "This pig's interests are quite similar to yours," Gumong thought. "If the two of you start squabbling, I don't know who will win." Breathing noisily, the Shangao stared through his piggy eyes at each of them in turn, then immediately cursed them out as expected. "Lame legs, dead face, blue-eyed monster, and Missy. You 4 bastards have trespassed into Bat Tower and woken me up. You stupid assholes have got some nerve." Gumong assigned each of these insults the second he heard them. Silently, he ticked them off on his fingers. Lame legs would be Zhang Yeshui. Blue-eyed monster is me. Princess and little dragon lady both look like their faces are frozen like that. But Princess is pretty tall and built. So Missy would probably be Murong Chuyi, who's half a head shorter than Moshi. So Moshi is Deadface for sure. "What are you doing here? You'd better fess up quick." The creature was an ancient spiritual beast, so Zhang Yeshui made obeisance and said, "My younger brother came to the Dream Butterfly Islands a few days back, but there's been no sign of him since. The only information we have led us to this Bat Island. This is why we've trespassed in your hallowed territory." "Your brother?" The Shangao squinted at him. "Haha, you're a big cripple. So is your brother a little cripple?" Zhang Yeshui had a good leash on his temper. His face betrayed nothing. "This one's younger brother is healthy and whole." "Oh, a non-crippled brat then. I did see one a couple days back. Does he wear white robes with gold trim and chirp and chatter when he talks? Looks like a slacker with a pig's brain?" Murong Chuyi's and Zhang Yeshui's expressions shifted slightly. Although the Shangao was crude, his description matched Yue Chunqing to a T. Zhang Yeshui bowed again. "Xiancheng, may I ask where this youth is now?" It was impressive that Zhang Yeshui could call this pig Xiancheng without blushing. But the Shangao didn't buy it. "Damn cripple, flattery won't get you anywhere," he snorted. "You still haven't answered the question I asked. I'll ask you again. Is your brother a chattering slacker with a pig's brain?" Zhang Yeshui paused, unwilling to endorse the Shangao's unfavorable description of his brother. As he hesitated, he heard Murong Chuyi's icy voice. "Correct. Stupid and long-winded, white clothes with gold trim. That's him. Do you know where he is?" "Heh, little brat, at least you admit it frankly." The Shangao's beady little eyes turned toward Murong Chuyi. "Although, you are a grown man, yet you're more like a fairy with that tiny waist and pretty face. That womanish look really makes you so ugly." "I asked you where that youth is now." Murong Chuyi did not like to wait. He was already running out of patience, clipping each word as he interrogated the pig. The Shangao froze for a second, perhaps caught by Murong Chuyi's electrifying gaze and imposing manner. "If I answered just because you asked, wouldn't that be a huge embarrassment for me?" Murong Chuyi narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" "Of course, everything must go by Master Shangao's rules." Murong Chuyi's dark brows drew together in rage. "What rules?" The Shangao snuffled. "That's a long story. First, I'll ask you all a question. Do you know the original purpose of this tower?" "It's a human sacrifice tower, used to imprison live humans for future use," Zhang Yeshui replied. "The cripple is right, but our Dream Butterfly Islands have plenty of spiritual energy, and the monsters have gradually learned to cultivate through Inadia. The Bat Queen sincerely wants to ascend as an immortal and has hardly killed any living creature in the past 100 years. She has no need to capture humans to consume. This tower was gradually abandoned, and now has become a haven for bat spirits cultivating in seclusion. In that case, there's no use in keeping my brother on the island. Zhang Yeshue said gently. Is it possible to beg magnanimity from your esteemed ruler and let my brother return with us? This is not what I expected. Meat Bun will always just, like, take you for a ride. Heh. Keep dreaming, lame legs. The Bat Queen doesn't kidnap cultivators, but your pig-brained brother threw himself into our hands and violated Her Majesty's taboo. Let him go? Tisk tisk. You think it's so easy? What taboo did he violate? Zhang Yeshue asked. The Shangao snickered. Same thing. You ask, but do I have to answer? Everything according to Daddy's rules. Murong Shuyi was at the end of his rope. Furious, he snapped his horsetail whisk. He didn't yet intend to strike, but his eyes sparked with rage. Brows drawn low, he snapped. We've already asked for your rules, so why haven't you explained them? The Shangao sneered, his tusks protruding. Missy looks so delicate, but his temper's worse than mine. How spicy. Fine, Daddy will tell you. He paused dramatically. Daddy guards this tower for the Bat Queen and doesn't usually hurt anyone. When you cultivators drop in to ask things, I can choose to be good and answer 3 questions. But if you receive the answer to a question, all must pay a similar price. So you must think it through. Only 3 questions may be asked, but the cost of an answer can be as low as 1 hair or as high as your 3 ethereal and 7 corporeal souls. How about it? You sure you want to do this? Murong Chuyi didn't even blink. Question 1. Where is Yue Chunqing right now? Oh, that was quick, asking right off the bat. The Shangao raised 1 finger. Your first question isn't worth much, and Daddy doesn't swindle people. How about this? We can make a trade, and I'll tell you his whereabouts. What do you want to trade? The Shangao licked his thick and greasy lips. Daddy likes to dine on human suffering. The more painful the past, the better it tastes. Okay. I had a straight face until I looked at the comments. I'm really trying. He glanced maliciously at the 4. If you're willing to stand right here and let me take some painful secrets to nourish myself with, then I'll answer your first question. Since this matter involved the others, Murong Chuyi turned to look at them instead of immediately accepting. The Shangao could answer 3 of their questions. Moshi thought they absolutely shouldn't give him everything he wanted on the first one. Otherwise, what would they have to barter with for the second and third? But before he could say so, Gumong spoke up. Pig Xiong, aren't you being a bit unfair? The Shangao widened his eyes. How so? Look, Gumong said. We've only asked you 1 question, but you want to take painful memories from each of us. You're acting really greedy. The Shangao disagreed. How's Daddy being greedy? You just said you're making a trade with us. 1 thing should be offered in exchange for another. So for each question we ask, you should only get to absorb 1 person's memories. Isn't that right? The Shangao was quiet. So for each question you answer, you can choose the memories from 1 person, not all 4 of us, Gumong continued. You're an ancient deity. Shouldn't you be more generous and stick to your word? You... The Shangao choked on his anger, his piggish face flushing red and purple. This was his honor at risk. Although he wanted to expel these foreigners as quick as possible, he could sense that the 4 individuals present were all victims of suffering. Their anguish was sure to taste mellow and rich, a delicacy beyond compare. Why should one let go of ducks that had waddled into one's mouth? Pig Xiong, I know, that killed me. The Shangao roared. All right, all right. One question for one taste of suffering. But it's not for you to volunteer yourselves. Daddy will pick among you. Gumong mimicked his tone and echoed cheerfully. All right, if you want to pick, then step right up. Come now, do you want lame legs, dead face, missy, or blue eyes? The Shangao sized them all up with care, his piggy nose sniffing out the bitterness in the depths of their souls. The more he scented, the greedier he became. Gumong was born a slave and was short 2 souls. Moshi's father had died early, his mother had betrayed him, and he'd been stabbed by someone he loved dearly. Murong Chuyi was abandoned by both parents in his youth and became an orphan. As for Jiang Yeshue, no words were necessary. He led a life of eternal loneliness. The Shangao swallowed hungrily. He wanted to go back on his word and gobble down all their memories at once. But just as trees needed bark, people needed to maintain face. Even the Shangao had his self-respect. These humans smelled exceptionally delicious. But he hadn't lost all self-control. He cleared his throat and made a decision. It'll be you. Yes, you. The damn cripple. You come up. Jiang Yeshue smiled lightly. Why is that? Is it that Xiancheng thinks I've endured the most suffering? You are maimed. You're the one. Are you unwilling? What wouldn't I do to save Chunqing? Jiang Yeshue said. But Xiancheng wants to eat secrets. Naturally, these are things I don't want anyone else to know. I can provide painful memories for you to absorb, but you must not let them out. Xiancheng, will you accept this? When memories enter my mouth, they become my food, said the Shangao. Why would I ever spit them out? Don't worry, don't worry. Daddy absolutely won't let them out. Jiang Yeshue was amiable, but far from stupid. Words are empty. Will Xiancheng swear a demonic oath? The Shangao was once a pig, after all. He was extremely greedy. He was merely in a hurry to swallow the suffering of others, and had no interest in broadcasting the secrets he absorbed. Without hesitation, the Shangao raised 2 fingers to swear a demonic oath. Can we get on with it now? Damn cripple, such a pain in the ass. Jiang Yeshue smiled warmly. Then I invite you to collect your dues. Gumong and Moshi had no objections, so the Shangao, standing in the middle of the blood pool, raised his head and opened his mouth. It emitted a whistling hiss. Wind whipped up around them, and dense wisps of black smoke soared out from Jiang Yeshue's chest. Everything rushed into the Shangao's stomach. When the gale subsided, the Shangao opened his eyes wide. He licked his lips, far from sated. Oh, not bad. Very tasty. You're just a damn cripple. I can't believe your painful memories actually involve. Jiang Yeshue cut the Shangao off with a smile. Xiancheng, did you forget your promise? The Shangao fell silent. But for some reason, once he finished chewing on Jiang Yeshue's suffering, he peered over at Murong Chuyi, his shiny little eyes dancing with malice. Murong Chuyi swept his sleeves back. You've received our payment. Now speak. Where is Yue Chunqing? That's the end of the chapter. It's almost 4, so I guess it's time to take a break. And I'll just be chewing on that. No pun intended. When we come back, we're going to be on page 147 for chapter 80, which is called Time Mirror. And I do want to know more about the time mirrors, so I'm very, very intrigued. Yeah, that was a lot. I Pig Xiang. I can't get over Pig Xiang. Okay, I will be back in like 10 minutes or less. Hello, I have returned. I am wondering if there's gonna be tasty food this stream, like normal with Meat Bun. Hopefully I'm kind of hungry right now, so I'm hoping not. But I'm gonna say that and then I'm gonna jinx myself. We're on chapter 80, Time Mirror. Him? The Shangao snorted through his pig's snout. As of now, he's locked in the 4th dark room at the top of this tower. There are 2 high-level bat demons guarding it, and 12 ancient blood-sucking vines on him. If the 4 of you are going to try rescuing him alone, heh, you'll have a bad time. Murong Chuyi scoffed. It's just 2 monsters and 12 chains. What's there to fear? With a wave of his hand, the horsetail whisk in the crook of his arm lengthened into a gleaming silver longsword. Lightning crackled and hissed around the blade. Murong Chuyi pressed 2 fingers together and called, Zhao Xue, ride the wind. The longsword Zhao Xue flickered splendidly, brightening Murong Chuyi's face as it floated before him. Zhao Xue was slender and light, so Murong Chuyi used an unorthodox method to ride his sword. He didn't step on Zhao Xue. Rather, the blade transformed into glowing orbs of sword glare. The silver lights encircled Murong Chuyi like gently drifting snow as the concentrated sword chi helped him ride the winds. Seeing this, the Shangao's tiny eyes widened, from the size of red beans to soybeans. You're leaving? Aren't you going to ask the 2nd and 3rd questions? No need. The Shangao grew agitated. You don't want to know what taboo the little pig brain violated? Murong Chuyi's focus had turned entirely toward rescuing Yue Chunqing. I don't care anymore, he said bluntly. How could this be? The Shangao flew into a rage. How dare you? Wouldn't Daddy be taking a big loss? One person's painful memories aren't enough to fill the gaps in my teeth. No, none of you are allowed to leave. You better ask those questions. You need to stay and offer me 2 more sets of memories. Otherwise, Daddy definitely won't spare you. Xiansheng, how have you taken a loss? Zhang Yeshue patiently responded. We agreed on 3 questions at most, but we didn't promise to ask all 3. Since Chuyi feels that 1 answer is sufficient, then of course. He was only halfway through this thought when the Shangao brandished his massive hatchet and swung it down in uncontrolled fury. The blood pool's scarlet waters surged outward, spraying coppery waves in all directions. Zhang Yeshue was closest to the Shangao, just as the blade was about to strike him, as Moshi was still summoning Tuntian as a barrier. They heard a deafening explosion. A golden talisman paper hissing with spiritual energy landed before Zhang Yeshue and burst into a powerful protective barrier that deflected the force of the Shangao's hatchet strike. Moshi's eyes flew wide. Gumong. The one who had deployed the talisman was neither Zhang Yeshue nor Murong Chuyi. It was Gumong who had reacted fastest among the 4. The protective talisman glowed with a blinding brilliance, and Gumong stood against the light, his clothes whipping around him in the gales of spiritual energy. At that moment, it was not only Moshi, but also Zhang Yeshue who turned to stare at Gumong's figure in astonishment. They seemed to see the silhouette of that General Gu who had fought alongside them many years ago. Give me another chance. This time, I won't disappoint you. Gumong's beseeching words on Warrior Soul Mountain echoed in Moshi's ears. Moshi studied Gumong's figure as it melded with the golden light. The beating organ in his chest felt as if it were seized by a thorn-covered hand. It throbbed in bitter agony. All this time, Gumong really had been trying to draw closer to his former self. To draw closer to the Gumong who hadn't yet committed treason, to the General Gu who had shared in life and death with them. Pig Xiong, if you want to eat painful memories, just say so. Why fight? With a wave of Gumong's sleeve, the golden barrier vanished. Come, you can have mine too. Will that satisfy you? Gumong took a few steps forward, planting his feet on the cracked stones beside the blood pool. He pointed to his own head. Have at it. The Shangao's greed was like a snake that wanted to eat an elephant. He jabbed a finger at Moshi and at Murong Chuyi, who was still ringed by sword glares. What about them? I want theirs too. Gumong raised his eyebrows. I'm not the boss of them. Why don't you ask them yourself? Their group was now on an isolated island in a tower filled with monsters. It would be better not to provoke them if they could help it. Murong Chuyi swept back his long sleeves, his expression wintry. If you want them, then take them. Hurry up. Afraid they would change their minds, the Shangao wasted no time and sucked in a great breath of air. He first absorbed wisps of rushing black smoke from Murong Chuyi's chest, swallowing them into his stomach. Then he seized upon the accumulated suffering within Moshi's heart. But the fretful fire in the Shangao's heart didn't dissipate after these servings of misery were consumed. Instead, he grew more insatiable. Because of his contract with the monster tribe, he had been stuck here guarding the tower for thousands of years. The previous Bat King ate people and took lives, so the Shangao had plenty of suffering to feast on in his wake. But this current Bat Queen was obsessed with leaving her monstrous body behind and ascending as an immortal. She'd gone a century without taking a human life. The only cultivator the Shangao had come into contact with in all this time was Yue Chunqing, who had scampered over a few days ago. The carefree and laid-back Yue Chunqing, who lacked for nothing and was always in a good mood, contained no great bitterness or hatred. He was exceptionally uninteresting to the Shangao's palate. But today was different. As Moshi and Murong Chuyi's suffering entered his gullet, the Shangao was like a man on the verge of starvation, tasting savory, piping hot meat. He wasn't willing to let this meal go. But despite everything, the Shangao was still an ancient beast. He possessed some self-restraint. Hardening his resolve, the Shangao moved his piggy eyes away from the two turned toward Gumong. All right, delicious, he yelled coarsely. I'll eat yours last, then Daddy will let you all go. Gumong smiled. Ah, then I really must express my gratitude for your leniency and grace. His tone and mannerisms were uncomfortably close to the Gumong of the past. Truth be told, Moshi had recently felt that Gumong had been pressing closer and closer to the specter of the former Gu Shixiong. As he watched Gumong smilingly negotiate with the Shangao, time seemed to have flowed backward. The Shangao was a simple-minded beast. He didn't hear the mockery in Gumong's words and thought he was earnestly being praised. He snorted and waved a haughty hand. Well, of course, Daddy's word is his bond. When have I ever backed out of a deal? He began to absorb Gumong's suffering. Black chi rushed out from the depths of Gumong's chest, transforming into a wide curl of black smoke that hung in midair before rushing into the Shangao's open mouth. The Shangao took a gulp, then suddenly closed his mouth. His eyes grew round as he stared at Gumong in disbelief, then flashed with a strange and avaricious brightness. Meeting those glinting eyes, Gumong had the feeling that this pig wanted to swallow him whole. He unconsciously took a step back. Bit off more than you can chew? He smiled tentatively. The Shangao huffed and puffed through his snout. Drool started running as he opened its mouth before he even spoke a word. How could this creature have imagined that a suffering equal to the accumulated grief of thousands would be contained within this young man who looked to be barely over 30? But strangely enough, the Shangao couldn't explore all of his memories. He could feel the anguish there, but couldn't get at the true reasons behind the suffering. For the greedy pig, this was like scenting the aroma of a sumptuous feast that constantly remained at a distance. Unable to satiate himself, his stomach rumbled with hunger, all his other organs tensing in sympathy. "You've lost many memories," the Shangao muttered. "What a pity, what a pity. There's such pain there even when lost. If you were to remember them, that flavor would be..." He sucked back a mouthful of drool, his eyes gleaming with a wicked light. Henry, you're so right. Blue, why have you not eaten since 1 p.m.? Seeing the Shangao's expression grow sinister, Moshi felt a chill. "Shuairan, come," he snapped. In the same moment, the Shangao tossed aside his previous proclamation about his word being his bond. He leapt from the blood pool, an evil beast pouncing on its prey. Face twisted and trailing spittle, he charged toward Gumong. "Watch out," Moshi shouted. Tossing out a talisman, he enclosed Gumong within a barrier. A beam of fiery light crackled to life, illuminating the hall of the ancient tower. Shuairan arced into the air as Moshi raised the whip. He stood before the Shangao, his gaze ruthless. "Beast, your greed knows no bounds." The Shangao looked up, laughing maniacally. "Greed? So what?" His vicious scarlet eyes looked past Moshi and fixed upon Gumong standing behind him. The Shangao licked his lips. "I hadn't expected such a prize to be delivered to my doorstep. I was tricked by the Bat tribe, confined to this blood pool for thousands of years to guard the tower on behalf of the Bat Queen. If I can flash back your memories, exploit your suffering, and devour you piece by piece, then I, ha ha ha, then I would be free. I would be free." Moshi's heart juddered. Flashback his memories? What did that mean? Could it be that this beast could recover Gumong's memories? But how could that be? Gumong was missing 2 souls. This was no ordinary case of amnesia, so how... His mind was still racing when the Shangao flung out an arm. An explosion boomed. The blood pool churned as if hidden dragons and colossal whales stirred beneath the surface. As the battle threatened to shake down the building, a bloody object as tall as 10 men rose from the depths of the pool. It broke the surface, waves of blood spreading out to batter the shore as if thousands of hydrangeas had scattered their petals upon the stones. Meat Bun, how dare you write things like that? A fall of scarlet droplets hit the earth, and the object became visible within the vermilion haze. Moshi was immediately stupefied, all the blood in his body seeming to freeze in an instant. The time mirror? When the blood dripped away, the mirror emerged, emitting a magnificent golden light. Its frame was carved with ancient talisman seals, and its surface reflected none of their figures, instead veiled in an opaque fog. Within it flashed the light of time and space, gleaming intermittently. It really was the time mirror. Moshi had only read of this mirror in the Academy's texts. It was linked to the 3 forbidden techniques. Rebirth? Sorry, I'm just... Alright, let me... It was linked to the 3 forbidden techniques. Rebirth, the Zhenlong chess formation, and the space-time gate of life and death. Over the course of the boundless river of time, legends about the rebirth technique were numerous and widespread, with tales of the Zhenlong chess formation coming in close behind. Yet, the space-time gate of life and death remained mysterious. According to legend, if one were to grasp this last forbidden technique, they could rip apart space and time, returning to the past and changing the future. But this technique had too many strange pitfalls, and the scrolls that told of it were not whole. Only fragments of text were extant. Whether this technique had ever truly existed or was simply a story was impossible to determine. Furthermore, it was said that any who tried to use the space-time gate of life and death would meet brutal, sudden, and grisly ends. Thus, other than madmen with intense obsessions, no one would pursue this particular forbidden technique. But the time mirror was different. Many ancient records across the 9 provinces made mention of this legendary object. According to myth, the exalted god Fuxi had left it behind when he created the space-time gate of life and death. Its function was similar to the gate in that it could transport someone to the past, but the mirror was just a prototype. Although it could construct an illusion of the past, it was impossible to actually change anything within it. Cultivators who entered the world of the mirror could make amends for past regrets, but their efforts had no effect beyond the world of the illusion. The instant the cultivator left the mirror world, any deviation from reality would be erased. The past in the mirror was like a dream. When the dreamer awoke, the world would be just as it was, perfectly unchanged. Thus, this time mirror bore a more fitting name, Mirror of Fleeting Dreams. All the past it contained amounted to no more than 3,000 dreams of golden millet. There is a footnote. A metaphor for dreams that cannot come true, from Tang Dynasty writer Shen Jiji's story, The World Inside a Pillow. In the story, Lu Sheng takes a nap on a celadon porcelain pillow in an inn, while the proprietor steams millet cake. He dreams of a life of wealth and glory, but when he wakes, everything in his dream is gone, and the millet cake is not yet cooked, symbolizing the illusory and unobtainable nature of dreams. Zhang Yexue and Murong Chuyi were grandmaster artificers. They, of course, also knew of the time mirror. Even the unusually calm and indifferent Murong Chuyi was ruffled. The time mirror is a treasure from the divine race. What is it doing here? I'm afraid it's not the full mirror, Zhang Yexue remarked. Look at the left side. They followed his lead and peered at the left side of the mirror. Indeed, there were clear signs of breakage. This mirror, the height of 10 men, was just a fragment of the real time mirror. But even such a scrap was more than enough to leave them stunned. The Shangao roared, hatred indelible, even beneath the yellow springs, a ray formation. He pointed his giant hatchet, and the black smoke he had just inhaled from Gumong struck the mirror's surface. Yeah, Blue, you are correct. It also must be weird reading this series if you just don't have the context of Arha at all. Yeah. I mean, it gives you the information that you need, but it just... You wouldn't get that, like, thing where you're like, wait a minute, I know about this. As the wisp of smoke entered the mirror, the dense fog within began to churn, surging like clouds blown by the winds of time. A blinding golden light burst forth. Sufferer, fall within, the Shangao howled. This call was like a soul summons. Those unconnected to these painful memories were entirely unaffected. Only Gumong cried out and fell to his knees, coughing up a great mouthful of blood. Gumong, Moshi called out, urgent. Gumong's limbs seemed bound like a puppet on strings. He hooked his fingers into the cracks and gullies of the brick floor with such force that tendons and veins protruded from his arms. Yet some shapeless force pulled him inexorably toward the mirror of light. At the same time, the Shangao emitted several piercing and bizarre shrieks. Murong Chuyi looked around, his sharp brows furrowing. Watch out! The dark recesses of the tower suddenly glowed with flickering red light. From a distance, it looked like thousands of lanterns aglow in an endless night, or a splendid river of stars. However, this magnificent sight was nothing so elegant. It was the sign that the bat spirits perching at the corners of the tower had awakened. Low, rustling cries swirled around them, growing gradually louder and more frequent until they crested like high waves on a stormy sea. Countless bat spirits flew toward them. Killing intent rose in Murong Chuyi's eyes. With a wave of his hand, he shouted, "Jiao Shui, destroy 1,000 mountains." The light of the long sword encircling him at once transformed into a billowing, snow-flecked wave of spiritual energy that crashed toward the approaching bat demons. With a deafening collision, the white spiritual tide broke against the black sea of bats, leaving in its wake a vicious tangle of blows. Yeah, I guess as far as like this series doing well as a standalone, I think it does, but it's hard for me to imagine it because I have read part of Arha. So I'm trying to think about what it would be like to read not having that context, and I can't visualize that. At the same time, the time mirror's pull on Gumong strengthened relentlessly. Gumong dove for the ground and wrapped his arms around the bone pillar next to him, but still couldn't resist the mirror's terrifying summons. Since time immemorial, entering this mirror was known to be a death sentence. Zhang Yeshui had been helping Murong Chuyi against the wild onslaught of bats, but as he turned and saw how poorly Gumong was faring, he moved to lend his aid. Before he could do so, Moshi's Shuairan lashed out and bound Gumong tightly. "No need," Moshi said to Zhang Yeshui. "I'm here." With these words, Moshi yanked back the snake whip Shuairan and wrapped his arms around Gumong. The instant he did, he understood how fearsome the call of the time mirror was. No mortal body could withstand the invisible pull of a mirror of godly make for long. Holding Gumong, Moshi, too, was yanked bodily toward the mirror. "Moshong! Gushong!" Zhang Yeshui cried. It was an address Zhang Yeshui had used on their military expeditions together. But since he had lost the use of his legs, he could no longer take part in remote campaigns. Later yet, one of this group of comrades became Shihajun, and another became Qingshu Elder. They had grown used to these polite and cold titles when they met. But in this moment of peril, the names that came to Zhang Yeshui's lips were those from their youth. The golden light grew brighter, its pull becoming stronger and stronger. They were about to be dragged into the mirror and into Gumong's excruciating past. It was a death sentence, a near certain death sentence. How many people had returned from this mirror unscathed? Although Gumong had no knowledge of this mirror, he had been thoroughly tempted by the Liao kingdom and possessed an animal intuition. As the two drew near its swirling surface, Gumong struggled in Moshi's arms. "Let go." Moshi didn't make a sound. He commanded Shuairan to bind the two of them even tighter. Gumong looked up, his eyes glinting with an unusual brightness. "If you stay outside, you can help them," he snapped. "Let me go." Moshi gritted his teeth. "You'd better shut up." "Let go. You shouldn't come with me." "Shut up," Moshi roared, thoroughly enraged. The golden light grew so bright it blinded them. By now, even Shuairan, anchoring them to the stone pillar, couldn't resist the time mirror's power. The spiritual whip disintegrated into motes of red light, like rosy clouds dancing at sundown, and vanished back into Moshi's body. Without Shuairan's protection, the two skidded toward the time mirror. At almost the same moment, the thousands of bats that had burst out of the darkness overwhelmed Murong Chuyi's holy weapon Jiao Shui. Murong Chuyi pulled out a dagger, its snowy blade illuminating his determined phoenix eyes. He slashed open his own palm without hesitation, then raised his hand, sending drops of blood flying into the air. He was attracting those bloodthirsty bats with spirit-infused blood, using himself as bait. Chuyi, Zhang Yeshui couldn't help but cry out. Murong Chuyi sent a barrier crashing down, trapping himself within. His powerful spiritual blood drew the bats like a magnet. They swarmed to attack, surrounding the barrier. The entire barrier and his snow-white figure within was instantly engulfed. Only his harsh voice rang out. Zhang Yeshui, stop that damn mirror. Hurry up. I can't hold them for long. They were beset by troubles. Here was Murong Chuyi wildly besieged by vampire bats, his thin protective barrier about to shatter at any moment. There were Moshi and Gumang, dragged to the very brink of the time mirror's realm, both seconds away from falling into the ancient godly mirror. Zhang Yeshui's face was pale as paper, but Moshi cried angrily, "It's not that easy. Help Murong drive off the fire bats and the Shangao, then come back and try to do something about this mirror." Without final instruction, Moshi and Gumang could hold out no longer. A final, violent tug hauled them into the time that billowed within the mirror's depths. The last thing Moshi saw before the mirror swallowed him was Zhang Yeshui steering his wooden wheelchair to Murong Chuyi's side and opening his Tiankun pouch. A dozen odd bamboo automatons fell to the ground and transformed into warriors armed with swords. Then he tumbled with Gumang into the abyss of time and space as his vision went black. Well, that's the end of that chapter. Henry, wait, the whip. Yeah, Moshi has the whip. Moshi has the whip and then the whale projection thing. The spiritual whale. I forget what it's called. So, this chapter, 81, is called Return to 8 Years Ago. I didn't think we were going to get here yet. Of not only truly uncovering the past, but we're not actually in the past. We're actually in a projection of the past. But I guess we're getting closer to this cover, being a thing. So yeah, well, I wonder where we're returning to. Yeah. Okay. Return to 8 years ago. Moshi opened his eyes. Dark blue-green curtains patterned with clouds hung above his head. The bed canopy fluttered gently in the wind, throwing dappled shadows across the hazy daylight coming in. He was momentarily at a loss. Where was he? Then he swiftly realized. He and Gumang had been sucked into the time mirror. This was the past that the ancient godly artifact had conjured. Although they hadn't truly traveled through time, the world within the mirror was an exact replica of reality. Moshi should be able to converse with the people of the past and even alter the course of events. So in that sense, there was little difference between truth and illusion. Moreover, this must be a part of the past that Gumang found extremely painful. The knowledge made Moshi's heart race. He sat bolt upright, his inky hair dark as black jade falling loose around his shoulders as he yanked back the canopy. He was in his own bedroom in Shiha Manor. Moshi looked around. The room's decor wasn't much different from his current one. The weapons rack was merely missing some blades, and a painting of Guangling peach blossoms still hung on the wall. He stepped over to the sundial placed by the windowsill. It was of Yue Manor make and glowed year-round with golden spiritual energy. With the tap of a finger, it showed the year and time of day. Moshi raised a hand and lightly pressed the sundial's glowing surface, and a small line of seal script appeared on the dial's face like ripples cascading outward. Moshi looked at the date displayed on the sundial. The organ within his ribs beat more and more ferociously, his face growing more and more ashen. As expected, it was that year. As expected, they had returned to that particular time. Moshi closed his eyes, his lashes fluttering. He swallowed. He would never forget the events of this year. The year when Gumong had been stripped of his power and his rank in the wake of his great defect at Phoenix Cry Mountain, where Lu Jianxing had been beheaded, where the Wangba army's surviving soldiers had been taken into custody. It was the year Gumong defected. And it was on this day that Moshi's pale, slender fingers stroked the spotless sundial, caressing the text flowing over its surface. The pain in his heart crushed him like clouds smothering the sun. He could barely breathe. On this day, he had been appointed to the northern frontier and left the capital. Gumong at the time had already had his fill of misery and passed his days grinning and giggling in a brothel. Moshi's attempts to persuade him were of no use. He could only wait for time to heal Gumong's wounds. He had been so naive back then. He'd thought Gumong would pick himself up as he had in the past, that he'd persist through all the pain and suffering. He was so sure that such a day would come, but he had been wrong. Yeah, not thinking about how much Moshi's room stayed almost the same. He is stuck in the past. And now, quite literally. Gumong didn't pull through. By the time Moshi completed his mission and returned to the capital, Gumong had already left Chonghua. A few months later, news came from the front lines that Gumong had committed treason and gone over to Liao. He never noticed Gumong's change of heart. He never got the chance to understand how Gumong had felt, to have a proper conversation with him. He never even got to say more than a few words to Gumong, or ask him to stay one last time before he stepped into hell. But now Moshi had returned to this particular year, to this particular day. He had returned to the period he had dreamed of countless times, to this moment that perhaps could reverse destiny. Despite knowing the time mirror couldn't actually change the past, Moshi's chest still burned as if scalded. He rushed out the door without even bothering about his appearance. The bright sunlight from 8 years ago shone fiercely onto his face, its piercing rays stinging his eyes. But he refused to close them. He fought back the urge to tear up as he gazed greedily at each plant and tree, each brick and stone. From around the corner came a quiet exclamation of shock, swiftly followed by, "This one greets my lord." Moshi turned, and his heart churned strangely again. Back then, Li Wei hadn't yet come into his employ. The one greeting him was a young servant girl named Shuang Qiu, whom Shihe Manor had taken in. A pitiable beggar whom Moshi had seen on the streets, whom he took into his estate because he could not bear to see her disgraced by malicious men. He found her to be clever and intelligent, and had once considered appointing her head housekeeper of Shihe Manor. Shortly after, however, he discovered that she was a spy sent by Murong Lian with orders to seduce and sabotage him. He had expelled her from his residence. Holding a water basin, Shuang Qiu bowed gracefully. "My lord woke up early from his nap today. I'll arrange for tea and snacks to be brought to you at once." Back then, Moshi had been sympathetic of her predicament and was extremely courteous to her. But with what he knew now, he only felt a deep disgust. He swept his sleeves back. "There's no need. Does my lord not have an appetite? I brewed some refreshing plum wine a few days back, so if my lord is willing—" "I said there is no need," Moshi stiffly said. Shuang Qiu finally noticed there was something odd about Moshi. She didn't dare press the issue, so she conceded and made obeisance. "Yes," she murmured softly. After a pause, she persevered. "But I was only acting out of care. I ask my lord not to blame me." Moshi found her rather irritating, but he wasn't a vindictive person, nor did he care to argue with a woman. Besides, he had more important things to do. Prepare a set of military robes. I need to go out. Does my lord mean to travel out of the city? Moshi paused. I mean to enter the palace. According to the remaining fragments of the ancient scrolls, those who entered the time mirror would return to their past self. Their appearance, features, and thoughts would all be reconstructed. Moshi likely only retained his memories because he had been pulled into the mirror at Gumong's side. He wasn't the target, but had entered by mistake. As for Gumong, he had probably made a full return to his past state. He would have no idea that he had come in from outside the mirror, to say nothing of what would happen later. Which meant that the person Moshi would encounter upon going into the city would be the General Gu from back then. That Gu Shishong, who had hit rock bottom and was in the direst of straits. Which meant he had a chance to talk to Gumong before he turned traitor. Moshi's hands began to tremble at the thought. His current self had traveled through time and was about to meet Gumong from 8 years ago. He could ask Gumong about so many things. He could get a clear look at Gumong's mental state before he defected. He could learn what kind of mood he was in and the details of what happened before he defected. He might even discover what, if anything, he could have done back then to prevent Gumong's treason. This kind of experiment was of no practical use. As soon as Zhang Yeshue rescued them from the mirror, any change he made would dissipate like smoke and clouds. Even so, Moshi could see himself on the cusp of receiving an answer to the questions, exhaustion, pain, and confusion that had plagued him for 8 long years. But before he could speak to Gumong, he needed to first visit the Imperial Palace. Shihajun. This one salutes Shihajun. As he entered the palace, the Imperial guards lowered their heads and crossed their arms to perform obeisance. The scarlet pheasant feathers on their helmets rustled, and their armor reflected the dazzling morning sun. It was an incredibly peculiar feeling. Even though Moshi had much on his mind, he couldn't help taking note of some familiar faces. In 8 years, the soldier in the corner of the corridor would become a defense elder at the academy. The Imperial Guard, standing to the right of the stone beast at the palace stairs, was gifted to Wangshu Manor by the Emperor and became Murong Lian's personal guard. The youth, with 7 beaded red tassels on his helmet, eventually died rescuing civilians from a demonic inferno in Chonghua's capital. Oh, Blue. That, the thing where Moshi was like, I won't argue with a woman. 'Cause, yeah, I agree. Moshi himself had bestowed the ribbon of heroes upon him in his coffin. There were also soldiers here whom Moshi had later picked to join the Northern Frontier Army. Whether they were destined to rise or fall, live or die, in the years to come, none knew their fates at this moment. Only Moshi walked among these living men of the past, as if strolling through a dream he'd had year after year. Seeing those faces, Moshi seemed to look upon lost souls from 8 years ago. So unreal and indistinct were they as they passed. Finally, he arrived at the Imperial throne room. The newly ascended Emperor reclined on dragon-embroidered pillows, his cheek pillowed in his hand as he closed his eyes in meditation. The beaded veil on his imperial crown swayed gently before his elegant features, fracturing the lines of his face and making his expression all the more inscrutable. Compared to his current self, the Emperor of 8 years ago seemed a great deal thinner and surlier. It was little wonder. In the months after the late Emperor passed, the nation had been unstable. The internal problems and external threats facing Chonghua were thorny and difficult to deal with. The irascible temper latent in the Emperor's features had likewise been much closer to the surface back then. This one greets your Imperial Majesty. Oh, Shihajun's here. The Emperor's eyelids fluttered open. His gaze was dark and cold as it alighted upon Moshi, who had come to stand before the throne. No matter how he tried to conceal it, that gaze betrayed a predatory air, containing vigilance, malice, and viciousness within its depths. As this ice-cold look pierced Moshi, he felt a sense of familiarity. It was a feeling that brought him anger as well as pain. Back then, the Emperor always betrayed this kind of attitude when speaking to him, whether intentionally or not. It was only after Moshi swore the vow of calamity, making it impossible for him to betray Chonghua or the power atop the throne, that the Emperor gradually relaxed his guard around him. But at this moment, the version of Moshi standing before the throne hadn't yet sworn this oath. When the Emperor looked at Moshi, his eyes were those of a wild beast that had never been chained, like a ferocious wolf or tiger. 8 years ago, Moshi had been younger and his senses less keen. Facing the Emperor with the insight he had now, the wariness in that gaze made him feel a chill. Today, Shihajun should be setting out toward the fiefdom at the northern frontier to teach and learn magic, the Emperor drawled. But you've come to the palace at this time to see us instead. Could it be that there's some issue? Moshi performed an obeisance. Yes, there is an issue. I would like to defer my departure for the northern frontier by a few days. Oh, the Emperor narrowed his eyes. Why? I'm feeling unwell. No other excuse would work when dealing with this fox-like Emperor. Only if Moshi said he was indisposed would His Imperial Majesty struggle to reject his request, especially considering the fact that Moshi never lied back then. He always spoke the truth and never begged illness when he was well, so his words were entirely trustworthy. As expected, the Emperor was somewhat taken aback. After a moment, he sat up straight, eyeing Moshi from his high daze, as he muttered, "Is that so? Is it severe? Why don't we select a skilled healer from Shenong Terrace and send them to Shiha Manor to examine you?" It's exhaustion and excessive dreams, no more, along with some difficulty sleeping, said Moshi. I'll be better with a few days' rest. There's no need to trouble Shenong Terrace. I see. The Emperor looked thoughtfully at Moshi, then asked with feigned carelessness, How long does Shihajun propose to postpone for? Moshi had counted the days until Gumong would leave the city to defect. It should be a week after he himself left the capital. He didn't want the same thing to happen this time, with him away. 10 days. The Emperor didn't immediately respond. Those eyes, like deep, icy pools, silently watched Moshi's face. At length, he chuckled softly. Shihajun's been on campaign for so many years. There have been many occasions where you didn't balk at donning your armor and heading back into battle after serious injury. How is it that you now want to postpone the assignment we've given you for 10 whole days on account of a touch of insomnia? This is rather too long. Moshi didn't argue with him. If I could push through it, I wouldn't have come to your Imperial Majesty to request a deferment. It's rare indeed for Shihajun to ask for rest after fighting so many battles. It would be unspeakably cruel of us to refuse. The Emperor toyed with the string of beads encircling his wrist, speaking slowly. But as Shihajun is an important subject of Chonghua, the heavy responsibilities we place on your shoulders are naturally numerous. If you were to delay for 10 days to rest, we're afraid that later affairs would prove difficult to manage. He paused, smiling. What do you think of a 3-day postponement? Moshi fell silent. 3 days? Lu Jianxing was due to be beheaded at the Easter market in 3 days. Why was the Emperor insisting on that day in particular? Gumong was sure to have an extreme reaction to Lu Jianxing's death. Yet the Emperor wanted him to leave on that day. I would implore your Imperial Majesty to grant an extension of a further 2 days, said Moshi. Will 5 days be acceptable? No. We can give you 3 days at most. The Emperor offered him another small smile. Any more, and we would be hard-pressed to deal with the urgent matters afterward. Your Imperial Majesty. Decision made, the Emperor cut Moshi off. Shiha-jun needn't continue. Since you are feeling unwell, go back to Shiha Manor and rest. After a brief pause, he said meaningfully, to combat insomnia and restlessness, one must soothe the mind. In the next few days, it would be best if Shiha-jun sees less of certain people who may make him frustrated and discontent. Moshi gazed up at the ruler sitting on his gilt throne. The Emperor peered down through his swaying bead crown. Does your Imperial Majesty mean Gumang? Moshi murmured. That's the end of the chapter. And hold on, because It's 4:50, just about. I'm wondering if I should read the next chapter. Yeah, the Emperor seems very suspicious. I could almost believe that he somehow was purposely instigating Gumang for reasons. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Do y'all want me to read the next chapter before I finish? I guess it's pretty short. It's chapter 82, which is called The Emperor of 8 Years Ago. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go ahead. Moshi had cut right to the chase. The Emperor didn't beat around the bush either. With a chuckle, he said, "As long as you take our meaning." After a beat of silence, Moshi said, "Gumang is a true friend of mine. Now that he's fallen from grace, would it not be bitterly disappointing were I to discard him?" Of course, loyalty is an admirable thing. It's not as if we are suggesting you never see each other again. The Emperor's slender fingers fiddled with a string of beads. But he's a criminal now. Shouldn't Shiha-jun avoid associations that might create misunderstandings in such troubling times? Those in the right fear no assumptions. I owe him. What's improper about me persuading him a little? Besides, in Gumang's current state, were he left alone, I'm afraid he would. He would what? Moshi gritted his teeth. Develop thoughts of treason. Back then, he hadn't known Gumang's intentions. He'd never suspected that Gumang could defect. But with the clarity of hindsight, he spoke now to remind the Emperor not to push Gumang too far. The Emperor's hand stilled. He smiled. Is Shiha-jun so mistrustful of his own friend? I only ask that your Imperial Majesty not leave him with no other choice. No other choice? The Emperor snorted audibly. All of his choices were his to make because the late Emperor deemed him an exception. Otherwise, what right would a slave-born man like him have to don armor, step onto the battlefield, and achieve success? You speak of us leaving him no other choice. Has he considered what kind of choices would be available to him if not for the late Emperor's grace? Would he not be no more than Murong Lian's dog? Moshi said nothing. The Emperor narrowed his eyes dangerously. If Gumang has even a slimmer of self-awareness, he should see that all of his former glory was bestowed upon him by the late Emperor. Now that he's led an army to rout, we merely punish him in accordance with the law. What has he to complain about? Moshi had come to the palace to ask the Emperor to postpone his departure. He hadn't expected to trigger a conversation like this. This past version of the Emperor was like a fox spirit who hadn't yet achieved human form. He couldn't effectively hide his motives from the Moshi of 8 years in the future. Nor could he mask the great wariness in his eyes when he looked at Moshi. What grievance could he have? What injustice could he feel? What right does he have to think of treason? The cruelty of these words chilled Moshi's blood. He had never heard such sentiments direct from the emperor's mouth. As these words registered in his ears, he felt a deep disappointment, even as a born noble. So how would Gumong have felt? Gumong, who had lost countless soldiers and seen his surviving forces taken into custody, who was denied gravestones when he asked, who had a brother about to be beheaded. Moshi suddenly understood. Back then, when Gumong had dragged him out drinking and cried out, deep in his cups, that he couldn't bear it anymore, that he was living a life worse than death, that wasn't a drunken impulse. Gumong really had been broken. Chonghua had sent him onto the battlefield in their name, but not out of a belief that Gumong and his ragtag army were safeguarding Chonghua. Rather, they considered this an act of grace. They, the powerful nobles, had bestowed this honor upon a slave. Hence his defeat could not be forgiven. To the emperor, Gumong wasn't a devoted general who had suffered a momentary defeat, but a slave who had failed to carry out his master's orders after being rewarded. He had frittered away the trust his master had graciously conferred. Perhaps, upon realizing this, Gumong's heart had shattered. Perhaps it had broken into pieces from the inside out, crumbling to ash. It was only that back then, Moshi hadn't known. He had believed, so naively, in Gumong's apparently thoughtless laughter. He hadn't understood Gumong at all. Enduring the stabbing pain and trembling of his heart, Moshi swallowed thickly. "Your Imperial Majesty, you are not him," he said hoarsely. "You don't know exactly how he thinks, nor where his limits lie. If there were to come a day when he really defected—" The emperor cut him off. "He doesn't dare." Moshi held his tongue. How comical it was to stand in front of the emperor from 8 years ago and hear him say, so self-assuredly, that Gumong would never defect. He doesn't dare to now, nor ever. Where does Shihajun imagine he could defect to? In the past, when Hua Po-an betrayed Chonghua and founded the Liao Kingdom, he had a following of slave soldiers. But what does Gumong have? What's left of his army has been detained and locked in prison. Why don't you tell us what you think he could do as just one man? Your Imperial Majesty thinks he couldn't leave Chonghua far behind as just one man? The emperor bared his teeth as he scoffed. If he really can't get over himself, then he might as well go. Moshi was stunned. He's of no use to us after his defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain. If he wishes to defect for this, then he will become a scourge sooner or later if he remains in Chonghua. The emperor stared into Moshi's gradually paling face. Shihajun, do you think that persuading him or accompanying him is useful? If he intends to defect, it is because he wants too much. An emperor's heart was the cruelest of all. He said coldly, "What he wants, we can't afford to give." Moshi's blood froze in his veins, as if his body were covered in ice. His hands clenched into fists as he said in freezing tones, "Your Imperial Majesty, what he wants are only gravestones bearing his men's names, nothing more." "Not just gravestones," the emperor replied. "Shihajun, what he wants from us is acknowledgement of their status. My apologies, we can offer them lenience, but we cannot give them glory." Furious, Moshi snapped, "So then why is your Imperial Majesty set on sending me away in 3 days? That's the day of Lu Jianxing's execution. Does your Imperial Majesty desire to see if Gumong can remain loyal to Chonghua and its ruler after having yet another of his bones broken?" The emperor's expression darkened at once. "Shihajun, do not be impudent. He can't bear your Imperial Majesty's testing." Moshi was beyond caring, nearly trembling as he spoke. "I swear this in front of the hall today. If your Imperial Majesty insists on this, Gumong will defect." Why do I think that the Emperor, engineered things so he would defect? The Emperor suddenly rose like a sword unsheathed. He slammed a palm down on the table. What does it matter if he defects or not? He's nothing but a dog. If he bites the hand that fed him and moves against Changhua, will our nation collapse? Will it dissolve? We will determine if this person is hiding treacherous intent, if he's cut from the same rebellious cloth as Hua Po-an. It feels like he wanted to make an example of a slave that gained freedom by making things happen the way they did before with Hua Po-an. This emperor was young indeed. Such naked rage was not something the current emperor would ever reveal. 3 days from now, you will leave the capital. The emperor's breathing gradually slowed, but his gaze remained hard as he stared into Moshi's face. You are dismissed. Moshi had never clashed so spectacularly with the emperor. This conversation flashed like the edge of a blade, stabbing at his heart. Silent, he gazed up at the man on the throne. It was said that a ruler could see past falsehood, but when did this emperor ever let down his guard and ease off testing his own subjects? Especially those of Gumong's class, who had ever been regarded separately from the nobles. As the saying went, those not of my clan are not of my heart. This was why the emperor was so wary of Gumong and so calculating, to the point that... Wait, Moshi's heart pounded as he recalled something else. Back then, Moshi had clearly known when Liu Jianxing's execution would be. Although he promised his imperial majesty to teach magic at the northern frontier, he had been set to return before Liu Jianxing's beheading. In other words, if everything had gone according to plan, he absolutely would have had an opportunity to see Gumong one last time before he defected. What had happened? The more he thought, the colder he grew. There had been an incident on the northern frontier. Several monstrous beasts charged through the garrison, and he was forced to stay an extra few days quelling the invasion with the garrison troops. Back then, he had found it suspicious that so many monsters had descended upon them so suddenly, yet hadn't given it much thought later. But now, a hazy suspicion gave way to an even more horrifying idea. It was a thought that had never occurred to him before. Back then, had the Emperor purposely sent him away to test Gumong? Moshi felt like a piece of ice had fallen into his chest, its insidious cold seeping into his bones. He was coming to a realization. His rushed departure, his delayed return. Had this all been deliberately orchestrated by the Emperor? Perhaps the Emperor had no intention of letting Gumong stay in Changhua, which was why he wanted no one by Gumong's side during the days of his greatest pain and disappointment. This former slave general was no longer useful, and since the Emperor couldn't find any suitable excuse to execute him, would it not be simply better to force him to defect? Could it be that the Emperor had planned for Gumong's treason all along? Moshi was so cold he was numb with it. After taking leave of the imperial palace with its lofty eaves, Moshi worked for a long while to catch his breath so he could warm up a little. For a moment in the hall he had yearned to recklessly ask the question, to kick up a fuss. But he understood that if he wanted to uncover more secrets, he had to let the normal course of events unfold. In this world within the mirror, he had one chance to unearth the truth. If he missed it, there wouldn't be another. Moshi raised his head, blinking his slightly reddened eyes and doing his utmost to calm himself and rein in his impulses. Only when he had gathered himself did he continue toward the Apricot Mansion brothel in the north of the city. He knew he would find Gumong there. Apricot Mansion was Gumong's favorite pleasure house, filled with splendidly attired women and the harmonious trills of the sheng and the xiao. Gumong had once said with a smile how he adored the clever beauties there, that only their delicate charms could soothe the sea of suffering and hatred in his heart. Moshi stopped before the brothel, which fluttered with red silks. He looked up at its wooden signboard, gold text on a red field. 8 years ago, when he was leaving the capital, he had also passed by this building, fragrant with flowers, and stopped before it. But back then, he hadn't gone in. He couldn't endure Gumong's degenerate wasting, nor could he tolerate the sight of the man who had once shared his bed, giggling amid a crowd of rouged and powdered women. The ache in his heart kept him from saying goodbye to Gumong before he left for the northern frontier. He missed his last chance to see Gumong before his defection. But this time it would be different. This time he wanted to have a sincere and genuine talk with Gumong, just as he had imagined countless times, just as he had dreamed of night after night. Moshi cleared his head, his nails sinking deep into his palms, and strode into the brothel filled with the chattering of women. Ayo, Shihajun. The madam started at the sight of him. Remembering the last time Moshi came to the brothel to hunt down a particular man, she blurted fearfully, "What brings Shihajun here today? Where's Gumong? General Gu isn't here." "I know he's here," Moshi said. "Which room is he in?" The madam shivered as she met his knife-like gaze. "My apologies, General Gu," she thought to herself. "This little shop is a shoestring business. We can't handle what Shihajun would put us through." She pulled on a greasy grin and forced a laugh. "Shihajun? What is my memory these days? Yes, I recall now. General Gu is upstairs. 3rd floor, turn left at the end of the corridor. It'll be the 3rd room, the boudoir of lingering fragrance. Shihajun, please go ahead." Moshi turned toward the stairs without a backward glance. Before he even reached the door, Moshi could hear the fluid plucking of a pipa, as well as a singer's clear voice. "Our sons went forth with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave. Last year the self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed. Your loyalty I safely keep, your valiant deeds I freely speak. For when these heroes' souls come home, throughout the land shall peace be known." It was Chonghua's soul-calling song. The singer had clearly never performed such a weighty piece in a brothel. Though she sang without a single mistake, each faltering note betrayed her hesitation. A song used to console the dead played on the pipa, like song of courtship. What a stark contrast in tone. And there's a footnote for Song of Courtship. Phoenix Seeking Phoenix, a famous love song written by Sima Xiangru for Zhuo Wenjun, with whom the latter eloped. Moshi walked over and stopped by the red lacquer door, which stood ajar. The singer played the final phrase, the last echoes of those delicate notes fading, followed by the peals of Gumong's lazy laughter. Such a soft sound, but it made Moshi's heart stutter in his chest. Jieje's voice is as sweet as a yellow oriole, but there's a section you played too quickly. The tune lost its shape. "It's my first time singing this," the girl simpered. "I can't play it well. I've embarrassed myself in front of General Gu." Gumong chuckled. "So what? In the vast country of Chonghua, you girls are the only ones willing to have fun with me these days and sing the soul song with me in secret. Come, I'll teach you how to play that part correctly. General Gu, do you know how to play the peapod too?" "The fingering is too hard for me," Gumong said, "but I can play other instruments." The room was silent for a moment. Then Gumong casually said, "Fengbo, come." Fengbo. Moshi closed his eyes. His fingers, suspended before the door, trembled. Suddenly, the bright notes of a suona sounded, shrill and comical. It was almost ridiculous. Yet tears brimmed behind his lashes. This was the sound of the holy weapon Gumong later couldn't summon ever again. Fengbo, its cry full of unsung regrets. Did I forget that the Swana was a holy weapon, or did we just not know that yet? Moshi felt a stubborn lump in his throat. He couldn't speak for a long beat, filled with the anxiety of a traveler who feared returning home as much as he yearned for it. In the end, he heaved a deep sigh and, enduring his dizziness, reached out to gently push open the red lacquer door. Sunlight poured in this dreamlike oh god, I know how to say this word, but it trips me up. In this dreamlike chiaroscuro, he saw Gumong from 8 years ago. Despite all Moshi had done to ready himself, the sight of this man felt like an unseen dagger tearing through his old scar. The agony spread from his heart to his limbs, a pain that made him tremble and go numb. He saw Gumong once more, clear-headed, black-eyed, wearing the robes of Chonghua, whole, healthy, not yet a traitor, bearing in his unbroken mind their shared memories. General Gu of the Empire. His Gu Shishong. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Okay. Alright, cool. That's the end of the chapter. And when we pick up again on Wednesday, we will be on page 179, chapter 83, which is called Gumong of 8 years ago. I'm seeing the chapter titles have a pattern right now. So, yeah, of course that's the end of the chapter. Yes, we have a lot of things to chew on until Wednesday, absolutely. I'm glad we're hitting this kind of cliffhanger stopping point on a Monday and not on a Wednesday, because I would hate that. Yeah, a lot to chew on. I feel affirmed in, like, what I thought the Emperor was doing. Obviously, like, we don't really have confirmation on that. We just have, like, what Moshi thinks the Emperor was doing. But I feel like he had some kind of plan where he wanted Gumong to defect. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think the Emperor made, like, a deal with the Liao Kingdom. I don't know what he was trying to gain by doing that, but I really think that he did. Yeah. I do. I also trust Moshi. He is a smart cookie. Well, yeah, that was today's reading. I feel like that was a lot. We went from the ship flying in the air and Gumong having wet dreams to talking to the pig demon who called himself Daddy, to a portion of the time mirror, and now this. So I'm just sort of reeling from that. But this is a great stream. Oh, you're welcome. And thank y'all for coming. And I will see y'all on Wednesday. So please have a great day. And we'll be back soon.